This sounds to me like the same pattern the Nazis used when they took over the schools after gaining power of Germany. And a friend of mine that grew up in Austria saw the same thing. So I think it's obviously a tragedy that we're dealing with.
Thank you. It's a hot potato. They've got the bill that's going to be for just the state board committee to have oversight and look at the procedure, the lessons on it.
What is the bill? I don't understand exactly what you mean by the bill.
Okay, there were two bills, one from the Senate, one from the House. The Senate was Dan Patrick's 1406 for oversight of CSCOPE, for the State Board of Education to look at CSCOPE, review it, make its recommendations. They had an agreement before this has gone through the process, so it was an unmandated agreement between TSCCC and Senator Patrick that they would get this started without it being law yet. Then House Representative Toth, in his bill, 760, was more powerful. He wanted transparency on the finances as well. And yet when it came up this last week, then there was some finagling that they would not vote on it unless they were voted on 1406. So they brought 1406 in the House committee to vote on it, and that if we didn't say anything more bad about it, then they would vote to send it to the floor. I mean, it was, I'm not a political animal, so I don't know exactly. All I know is now that we have 1406 in there, it's just basically an oversight of this CSCOPE. That's it.
So this CSCOPE has come to the attention of our legislators.
Some know about it, some don't.
Concerned about it, and they've put these bills up. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. My original question for you was, are other religions other than Islam presented in the curriculum?
I think Irving ISD, when it came out that there was more Islam than anything else, and they hired someone to look and to go through and check, make a check of the percentage of it, and they came out with the thing, and I think it made the Dallas Morning News, that there was more Christianity than anything else in it. But then we found out the person who did the review was a friend of the Region Center. So I don't know how objective that one was. I do know that I was at Lake Jackson, and I was there a week after they had had a meeting with their superintendent, and she had 500 parents, angry parents, there. And she said, we've taken out that particular lesson that had to do with the verbiage of Allah is the Almighty God. They have to say that out loud in one lesson. Okay, and they have to write it also, and they have to write the pillars of Islam. So you can see how that's questionable when you have to say something or you have to write something instead of listening and whatever. So she said, we've already taken that out. Well, one parent stands up and says, you lie. Does that sound familiar? You lie. And so that made a big bone of contention. By the time I got there the next week, then this little meek-mannered mama then brought me the lesson. And she said, here, this is it, right here. And basically there were 13 questions on it. 9 of the questions had to do with Islam, 4 had to do with Judaism, and 2 had to do with Christianity for that unit. So that particular lesson, just that thing, and then they had to say that Allah is the Almighty God. They have to write that out. Some have done that, and they've gotten marked down, and yeah. I've heard that too, that they've refused to do certain things.
Hi, one of the questions I have is, I've approached my school board, and they say, well, if we don't use CSCOPE, then what do we use?
That's a good question. You will hear the exact verbiage. When I went in to get my contract from my local school, because for this handout that I had to give out, I wanted the contract between the Region Center and a school, so I went in and said, can I have our contract? And he said, oh sure, you're a taxpayer, so I got it. And then he said the same thing, if we don't have CSCOPE, what can we use? Well, tell me, what did we have before CSCOPE? Okay, number 1. Number 2, do you remember that rider bill that was up there that was supposed to teach all the teachers the TEKS in it? I'm doing one tomorrow at Llano ISD. That's another 7 hours that direction. And that was the birthplace, basically, of CSCOPE. They've been working on that for 3 years to get it out. But that's the thing that they're doing. If we don't have CSCOPE, what do we have? Your superintendent and your curriculum director are hired to find it. It's not me to find that. It's for you to find that. And I've written curriculum for my school from pre-K through 6 on all subjects. It's not something that is that difficult to do. Well, the connection to Common Core is the fact that I will hear some of these lessons outside of the state of Texas that are similar. Okay, that's a real, a lame connection. But the other connection is Linda Darling Hammond is who the TASA at their national convention had for their main speaker. That they went, the national school administrators went to California to listen to her. And I think there's one superintendent who, why you would tweet this, I don't know. Y'all tweet or Twitter? That's Twitter, I mean. You Twitter. He Twittered, I'm on my way to Washington, D.C. to learn about Common Core. And he's a Texas superintendent. So, there you go. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, what do you think about, I understand that they passed this law where they're going to start issuing different type diplomas, and what would this CSCOPE have to do with that, or fill in there?
I don't know if it would have anything to do with it at all. What do
you think about the different type diplomas they could offer?
I believe in making kids successful, period. So if it's a kid that wants to earn a diploma in one area or a certification in mechanics or certification in this or that or whatever, I'm all for it. As long as
is that a kind of a way of dumbing down the school system in a way?
You can look at it that way. I told my kids that I didn't care if they were street sweepers, but they would know all of the works of art and the great works of music and the great classics, and they would be able to have a discussion with anybody and write a decent letter, read and understand, communicate well. And so I believe in freedom of choice. So like if a student wants that track, I think that would be great. I put together a program when Governor Bush was governor here. I was on his Reading Initiative Board, and it was called Points and Effort, that any child could earn points with independent study, and then they could graduate early because they had accumulated the credits. And that last year that the taxpayer would have paid for them to be a senior in high school would have gone on to a trade school or on to a university. It wouldn't have cost the taxpayer any more money. It didn't go very far. Yes, ma'am.
Is it true that Common Core is trying to buy CSCOPE?
That's the rumor. Okay. Now, you have to go back and look at the facts. They had their dissolution clause, and I've talked to lawyers about this. When a corporation dissolves, it can only dissolve according to the dissolution clause. You can't just say, well, we're going to do away with it, and now we're going to take back CSCOPE. You have to follow what was in the bylaws of the organization, verbatim. They changed the bylaws to sell this to the federal government through emails. They did 4 days before they had a meeting. They changed it and filed it for the corporation law changes on May the 4th. And then they had a meeting on May the 9th to vote on it. Now, they'd already filed it and changed it, but they voted on it 5 days later. And so I asked somebody in the Senate about that. Why would you do that? Because that doesn't make sense. Why could they have not waited for 5 days? And it had something to do with the bill coming down. So that if it dissolved, then the person that it actually would go to the federal government. So there was a connection there. Now, whether that's going to take place or not, because they're supposedly dissolving their 501(c)(3). So we'll see what happens here.
Yes, I had 2 points to the lady who was wondering, what do you do if you don't use CSCOPE? I'm from Kilgore, and just Monday, our school board luckily decided to not use CSCOPE and to write their own curriculum. And so I've attended several meetings over the last couple months, and so if anybody would want to, I'd be happy to meet with anyone and share my notes and let you know how they came about that decision just from my perspective of what I observed. And so any school board members that would want to meet, or any parents or anybody, if I could help give you any information about how they came to their decision, I'd be glad to meet with you. And then as far as addressing it, how it's similar to Common Core, My daughter is a second grade teacher in Oklahoma City where they use Common Core. This is her first year of teaching, and it's just been horrible. And some of the similarities to Common Core, she has told me every day. She tells me the walkthroughs, they do the walkthroughs in Common Core just like they do with CSCOPE. She interrupts her class. She has to she has to say the right words. They come in with their little iPad and check her off, and she's being graded. And if the kids, they're little second graders, and if they can't state the objective of the lesson, she has to say it every so many minutes when someone's in there observing her. She has to ask the class, now class, what's our objective? And they're in little centers. She has to point to every center. What's your objective over there? What's your objective over there? And she has to have it on her board. They have to be able to state it. And so
it's ultimate control.
It does
it's
have.
Not teaching.
Yes.
And it's definitely not learning.
And they're very much into journaling. Very much, they do a lot of journaling, and there's no wrong answers. And it is very much like Common Core. And when I was in Oklahoma City, I actually went to a Common Core store. It's a supplemental store for teachers to go and get supplemental stuff, and it's real similar to the CSCOPE stuff.
Years ago, I was introduced to the great books, The Western World, that's edited by Mortimer Adler, and he has a companion volume to that called The Great Ideas Program. This was in the 50s or 60s. This actually came out. But in it, he talks about ideas and their consequences, and when I got a hold of those books, they completely changed my life. And when I talk to students, they don't know who Aristotle is. They don't know who Blaise Pascal is. They don't know who all the great thinkers of the past were. And it scares me that sometimes I wonder if we have those great father figures out there. That can you just kind of share on that and your thoughts on even that program, if you know about it?
I don't know particularly about that program, but I will tell you that you have X number of minutes with a student in the classroom. The polling that I did for a number of years with teachers, that in the state of Texas, elementary teachers, if you take out all non-instructional activities, playground, lunch, bathroom breaks, water, whatever, that per student is 3.5 minutes per student per day for feedback. That's elementary. It's less than 2 in the high school level. Now that's if you're working one-on-one, okay? So they'll say, well, we work, group instruction. But the brain has to have feedback from somewhere to put it from short-term to long-term memory. Either it has to come from the teacher, it has to come from the validation of checking the material, or